Housemaid wins the lottery, but tricks her husband to keep the prize for herself. 2 weeks after their divorce, she discovers that the money wouldn't be so easily obtained. Amanda's alarm blared at 5:30 a.m., jolting her from a fitful sleep. She reached out, fumbling to silence the incessant noise before it woke Brendan. Her husband's snores rumbled from his side of the bed, a reminder of the vast divide between them. With a sigh, she slipped out from under the covers, her bare feet meeting the cold hardwood floor. The pre-dawn chill nipped at her skin as she padded to the bathroom. Amanda caught her reflection in the mirror, tired eyes, disheveled hair, and a weary expression that seemed etched into her features. At 35, she felt decades older, worn down by years of relentless work and a loveless marriage. As she went through her morning routine, Amanda's mind wandered to the day ahead. Another 12-hour shift as a housemaid for the Wilsons, a wealthy family in the suburbs. She tied her hair back into a neat bun, applied a touch of concealer to hide the dark circles under her eyes, and slipped into her crisp uniform. In the kitchen, Amanda started the coffee maker, the gurgling sound filling the quiet house. She prepared a simple breakfast of toast and scrambled eggs, setting aside a plate for Brendan. It was a habit she couldn't shake, even though he rarely acknowledged the gesture. As she sipped her coffee, Amanda's gaze fell on the stack of unpaid bills on the counter. Her stomach clenched with familiar anxiety. Brendan hadn't worked in months, claiming a back injury that mysteriously disappeared when it was time to go out drinking with his friends. The burden of their financial struggles fell squarely on her shoulders. The clock ticked relentlessly, reminding Amanda of the long day ahead. She grabbed her bag and keys, pausing at the front door to take a deep breath. The weight of her life settled around her like a heavy cloak as she stepped out into the crisp morning air. The bus ride to the Wilsons' house was a blur of familiar faces. Other housekeepers, construction workers, and early shift employees. Amanda found a seat near the back, her mind drifting to happier times. She remembered the early days of her marriage to Brendan, when his charm and easy smile had swept her off her feet. How different things were now. As the bus wound through the increasingly affluent neighborhoods, Amanda felt the familiar pang of envy. The manicured lawns and sprawling houses were a stark contrast to her own cramped apartment. She pushed the feeling aside, reminding herself that comparison was the thief of joy. The Wilsons' house loomed ahead, a testament to wealth and privilege. Amanda disembarked, her steps heavy as she approached the service entrance. Mrs. Wilson greeted her with a distracted smile, already rattling off a list of tasks for the day. "Oh, Amanda, there you are. The guest room needs to be prepared. We have company coming this weekend. And please make sure to dust the china cabinet in the dining room. Oh, and the children's rooms are a disaster." Amanda nodded, mentally cataloging each request. As Mrs. Wilson continued her rapid-fire instructions, Amanda's mind wandered to her own home, where Brendan would likely still be sleeping. She pushed away the resentment that bubbled up, focusing instead on the day's work. Hours passed in a flurry of dusting, scrubbing, and organizing. Amanda moved through the house like a ghost, efficiently tending to each task. The physical labor was a welcome distraction from her troubled thoughts. During a brief lunch break, Amanda sat alone in the kitchen, nibbling on a sandwich she'd packed. Her phone buzzed with a text from Brendan. "Where's the grocery money?" She stared at the screen, a mixture of frustration and despair washing over her. With trembling fingers, she typed back, "I left it on the dresser. Please, only buy essentials." No response came. Amanda knew that essentials in Brendan's mind likely included a six-pack of beer and cigarettes. She closed her eyes, fighting back tears of frustration. As she resumed her work, Amanda found herself in Mr. Wilson's study, dusting the shelves lined with leather-bound books. Her eyes fell on a framed photo of the Wilson family, smiling, happy, united. The contrast to her own life was painful. "Is everything all right, Amanda?" Mr. Wilson's voice startled her from her reverie. She turned, plastering on a polite smile. "Yes, sir. Just finishing up in here." He nodded, his expression kind but distant. Keep up the good work." As the day wound down, Amanda felt the familiar ache in her bones, a testament to hours of physical labor. She gathered her things, bid goodbye to Mrs. Wilson, and headed for the bus stop. The ride home was filled with dread. What mood would Brendan be in? Would he have spent the grocery money on alcohol again? The familiar streets of her neighborhood seemed to mock her with their sameness, a reminder of the life she felt trapped in. As Amanda climbed the stairs to her apartment, she took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever awaited her behind the door. She inserted her key, turned the lock, and stepped inside, ready to face another evening in a life that felt increasingly like a prison of her own making. Amanda stepped into the apartment, the stale smell of cigarette smoke and unwashed dishes assaulting her senses. Brendan was sprawled on the couch, eyes glued to the television, an empty beer can dangling from his fingers. "You're late," he grunted, not bothering to look at her. Amanda bit back a retort. "I had to finish up some extra work," she said, hanging up her coat. "Did you get the groceries?" Brendan shrugged, reaching for another beer. "Didn't have time." Anger flared in Amanda's chest, but she swallowed it down. Fighting wouldn't change anything. She moved to the kitchen, grimacing at the pile of dishes in the sink. As she began to clean up, her mind wandered to the lottery ticket tucked safely in her purse. She'd bought it on a whim during her lunch break, a small act of hope in her otherwise predictable life. The next morning, Amanda rose early as usual. Brendan's snores filled the bedroom as she quietly dressed and slipped out. The cool morning air felt refreshing after the stuffy apartment. She walked to the corner store, nodding a greeting to Mr. Chen, the owner. "Good morning, Amanda," he said with a warm smile. "Here to check your ticket?" Amanda nodded, fishing the crumpled paper from her purse. Mr. Chen took it, his eyes scanning the numbers. Suddenly, his eyebrows shot up. "Amanda," he whispered, "you've won. And it's the jackpot." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Amanda gripped the counter, her knees weak. Are you sure?" Mr. Chen nodded vigorously, showing her the winning numbers. "You need to sign this right away and contact the lottery office. This is life-changing money, Amanda." As the reality sank in, Amanda's first thought wasn't of joy or relief, but of Brendan. If he knew about this money, he'd never let her see a cent of it. Years of his controlling behavior and financial abuse flashed through her mind. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice shaking, "please, you can't tell anyone about this. Not yet." The old man's eyes softened with understanding. He'd seen the bruises she sometimes tried to hide, heard the arguments that echoed from their apartment. "Your secret is safe with me, Amanda. But please be careful." Amanda nodded, tucking the signed ticket into her bra for safekeeping. Her mind raced as she walked to the bus stop. This was her chance, her only chance, to escape the life she'd been trapped in for so long. At work, Amanda went through her tasks mechanically, her thoughts consumed by plans and possibilities. She could leave Brendan, start a new life somewhere far away, but she knew it wouldn't be that simple. Brendan would never let her go without a fight, especially if he knew about the money. As she scrubbed the Wilsons' kitchen floor, an idea began to form. It was risky, perhaps even cruel, but it might be her only option. That evening, Amanda returned home to find Brendan in an unusually good mood. He'd been out with friends and was riding the high of a few drinks. "Hey, babe," he said, pulling her into a sloppy embrace. "I've been thinking, we should go on a vacation, get away from all this for a while." Amanda stiffened in his arms. "Brendan, we can barely pay our bills. How could we afford a vacation?" His face darkened. "Always so negative. Can't you just appreciate that I'm trying here?" She saw her opening and took it. "I'm sorry, it's just... I'm worried, Brendan. We're falling behind on everything. I think we might need to consider bankruptcy." Brendan pulled away, his mood souring instantly. "Bankruptcy? Are you crazy? Do you know what that would do to my credit?" Amanda pressed on, her heart racing. "I know it's not ideal, but we're drowning here. And if we file, well, It might be easier if we weren't married. Brendan's eyes narrowed. What are you saying? Maybe we should consider a divorce, Amanda said, her voice barely above a whisper. Just temporarily, to protect your assets. We could always remarry later. She held her breath, watching the wheels turn in Brendan's head. He was silent for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You might be onto something, he mused. A quick divorce, clean slate for both of us. Yeah, that could work. Relief flooded through Amanda, but she kept her face neutral. I'll look into it tomorrow, see what our options are. Brendan grinned, already warming to the idea. That's my smart girl. Always thinking ahead. As Amanda lay in bed that night, listening to Brendan's steady breathing beside her, she felt a mix of guilt and exhilaration. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with potential pitfalls, but for the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope. Tomorrow she would set her plan in motion. She would contact a lawyer, start the divorce proceedings, and begin laying the groundwork for her new life. It wouldn't be easy, and the guilt of her deception weighed heavily on her conscience. But as she thought of the years of neglect, the emotional abuse, the constant struggle to keep their heads above water, while Brendan drank away their meager savings, she steeled her resolve. This was her chance, perhaps her only chance, to break free. And she was going to take it, no matter the cost. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Amanda threw herself into the divorce proceedings with a fervor that surprised even her. She found a lawyer who specialized in quick, uncontested divorces and managed to expedite the process by citing financial hardship. Brendan, for his part, seemed almost eager to sign the papers. The prospect of escaping their mounting debts had him in an unusually agreeable mood. He didn't question Amanda's sudden efficiency or her insistence on keeping things amicable. If anything, he seemed relieved that she was handling all the details. You're a real trooper, Amanda, Brendan said one evening as they sat at the kitchen table reviewing the divorce agreement. I don't know how you're keeping it all together. Amanda forced a smile, guilt gnawing at her insides. I just want what's best for both of us, she replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. As she watched Brendan sign the papers, a mix of emotions washed over her. Relief, excitement, fear, and a tinge of sadness for the love they once shared. But she pushed those feelings aside, focusing on the task at hand. The day the divorce was finalized, Amanda felt as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She stood outside the courthouse, breathing deeply, savoring her first moments of freedom. Brendan had already left, muttering something about meeting friends to celebrate. Amanda's phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Chen. Is it done? Are you safe? She smiled at the old man's concern. Yes, it's done. Thank you for everything. Now came the tricky part. Amanda had to claim her lottery winnings without arousing suspicion. She had told the lottery officials she needed time to get her affairs in order before claiming the prize, and they had agreed to keep her win confidential for now. The next morning, Amanda woke early, her stomach in knots. Today was the day she would claim her new life. She dressed carefully in a simple but professional outfit, wanting to look the part of a lottery winner without drawing too much attention. At the lottery office, Amanda was ushered into a private room where a team of officials waited to process her claim. Her hands shook slightly as she presented her winning ticket and identification. Congratulations, Mrs. I'm sorry, Ms. Reeves, a friendly woman in a suit said, smiling warmly. We just need to verify a few details, and then we can proceed with the transfer of funds. Amanda nodded, her mouth dry. Of course. And please, call me Amanda. As the officials went through their procedures, Amanda's mind wandered to the future she was about to claim. A new home, perhaps in a different city. The freedom to pursue her dreams without the constant weight of financial stress. Maybe even a chance to go back to school. All right, Amanda, the woman's voice snapped her back to reality. Everything seems to be in order. We just need you to sign here, and then we can process the transfer to your account. Amanda's heart raced as she scrawled her signature on the document. This was it, the moment that would change everything. The woman tapped at her computer for a moment, then frowned. "I'm sorry, there seems to be a small issue with the transfer. Can you confirm your bank account details for me?" Amanda recited her account number, a seed of worry taking root in her stomach. The woman's frown deepened. "I'm afraid there's a problem. The account you've provided appears to be a joint account, and it's showing as recently closed." The room seemed to tilt around Amanda. That's not possible," she stammered. "I just opened a new account last week." "Let me double check," the woman said, her fingers flying over the keyboard. After a moment, she looked up, her expression grave. "I'm so sorry, Amanda, but it appears there was an error in processing. The funds were mistakenly deposited into your old joint account 2 days ago." Amanda felt the blood drain from her face. 2 days ago, before the divorce was finalized, before she had a chance to remove Brendan from the account. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "No, this can't be happening." The woman reached out, placing a comforting hand on Amanda's arm. "I understand this is upsetting. We can certainly investigate the error and see what can be done to rectify the situation." But Amanda barely heard her. Her mind was racing, piecing together the implications of this catastrophic mistake. Brendan must have been notified of the deposit, and knowing him, he would have emptied the account immediately. With trembling hands, Amanda pulled out her phone and dialed the bank's number. As she listened to the automated system recite her account balance, her worst fears were confirmed. The account was empty. She looked up at the concerned faces of the lottery officials, her voice hollow as she spoke. "He took it. Brendan took all of it." The room erupted into a flurry of activity. Officials made calls, discussed legal options, and tried to reassure Amanda. But their words washed over her like white noise. All she could think about was Brendan, probably already halfway across the country with her money, her chance at a new life, in his pocket. As Amanda sat there, numb with shock and despair, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that this wasn't over. She had come too far, fought too hard to let it end like this. Somehow, some way, she would find Brendan and reclaim what was rightfully hers. Little did she know, the battle that lay ahead would test her in ways she never imagined. Amanda stumbled out of the lottery office, her mind reeling. The bright sunlight and bustling street seemed to mock her shattered dreams. She found a nearby bench and collapsed onto it, her legs no longer able to support her. For what felt like hours, she sat there, staring blankly at the passers-by. The weight of her loss pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe. Everything she had planned, all her hopes for a better future, had vanished in an instant. A gentle hand on her shoulder startled her out of her daze. She looked up to see Mr. Chen, concern etched on his weathered face. "Amanda, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost?" The kindness in his voice broke something inside her. Tears she had been holding back flooded her eyes, and before she knew it, she was sobbing uncontrollably. Mr. Chen sat beside her, his presence a comforting anchor in the storm of her emotions. When she finally calmed enough to speak, Amanda poured out the whole story. Mr. Chen listened silently, his frown deepening with each word. "This is not right," he said firmly when she finished. "We must do something. You cannot let him steal your future like this." Amanda shook her head, feeling defeated. "What can I do? He's probably long gone by now. And even if I could find him, how could I prove the money was mine?" Mr. Chen stood up, a determined glint in his eye. "First, we go to the police. Then we find you a good lawyer. This fight is not over, Amanda." His words sparked a tiny flame of hope in Amanda's chest. She nodded, allowing him to help her to her feet. The next few days passed in a blur of police statements, legal consultations, and sleepless nights. Amanda found herself in the office of Barbara Goldstein, a sharp-eyed lawyer known for taking on challenging cases. "So let me get this straight," Barbara said, leaning back in her chair. "You won the lottery, but didn't tell your husband. You divorced him to keep the money, but due to a clerical error, it was deposited in your joint account before the divorce was finalized. And now he's disappeared with all of it." Amanda nodded, her cheeks burning with shame. "I know how it sounds. I know what I did was wrong, but—" Barbara held up a hand, cutting her off. "I'm not here to judge you, Amanda. I'm here to help you get your money back. And believe it or not, we might have a case." Hope fluttered in Amanda's chest. "Really? How?" "The divorce agreement shows no prior knowledge of the lottery winnings," Barbara explained. "Brendan signed a document stating that all assets had been disclosed. If we can prove that he knew about the money when he emptied the account, we can argue that he committed fraud." Amanda leaned forward, hanging on every word. "But how can we prove that? And how can we even find him?" Barbara's lips curved into a small smile. "That's where the real work begins. I have contacts, private investigators, who specialize in tracking down people who don't want to be found. It won't be cheap and it won't be quick. But if you're willing to fight, we can do this." For the first time since that terrible day at the lottery office, Amanda felt a spark of determination. "I'll do whatever it takes. This is my only chance at a better life, and I'm not giving up without a fight." Barbara nodded approvingly. "That's what I like to hear. Now let's get to work." The next weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Amanda threw herself into the search, working closely with Barbara and the private investigator she had hired. They combed through Brendan's social media, contacted his friends and family, and followed every possible lead. Meanwhile, Amanda had to figure out how to survive. With no access to the lottery winnings and her savings depleted, she found herself in a precarious financial situation. She picked up extra shifts at the Wilsons, took on a second job waiting tables at night, and moved into a tiny studio apartment to cut costs. The stress and exhaustion were taking their toll. Amanda lost weight, dark circles permanently etched under her eyes. But every time she felt like giving up, she reminded herself of what was at stake. One evening, as Amanda was leaving her waitressing job, her phone buzzed with a message from Barbara. Her heart raced as she opened it. "We found him. Small town in Florida. Call me ASAP." Amanda's hands shook as she dialed Barbara's number. The lawyer answered on the first ring. "Amanda, are you sitting down? You're not going to believe this." Barbara's voice was filled with excitement as she explained. Brendan had been careless, flashing his newfound wealth around a small coastal town. He'd bought a flashy car, was staying at an expensive resort, and had been bragging to locals about his lucky break. "We have witnesses, Amanda," Barbara said. "People who heard him talk about coming into money right after his divorce. This is exactly what we needed." Amanda felt dizzy with relief and anticipation. "What happens now?" "Now," Barbara said, her voice steely with determination, "we go after him. I'm filing for an emergency injunction to freeze his assets. Then we're taking this to court." As Amanda hung up the phone, she felt a surge of emotions: relief, anger, fear, and most of all, a fierce determination. Brendan had thought he could steal her dreams and get away with it. He was about to learn how wrong he was. For the first time in weeks, Amanda allowed herself to smile. The battle was far from over. But now, finally, she had a fighting chance. Amanda's world shifted into high gear as Barbara's legal team sprang into action. Within days, they had secured an emergency injunction, freezing Brendan's assets and preventing him from fleeing or spending more of the money. The small Florida town where Brendan had been living large became the center of a legal storm. Amanda, along with Barbara and a team of lawyers, flew down to confront him and begin the court proceedings. As their rental car pulled up to the lavish resort where Brendan was staying, Amanda's stomach churned with a mix of anger and anxiety. She spotted him lounging by the pool, drink in hand, without a care in the world. The sight of him enjoying her hard-won fortune made her blood boil. Barbara placed a steadying hand on Amanda's arm. "Remember, let us handle this. Don't engage with him directly." Brendan's face drained of color when he saw the group approaching. He scrambled to his feet, nearly knocking over his drink. "Amanda, what the hell are you doing here?" Before he could say more, Barbara stepped forward, her voice cool and professional. "Mr. Reyes, I'm Barbara Goldstein, representing Amanda Reeves. We're here to serve you with legal documents regarding the misappropriation of lottery winnings." Brendan's shock quickly turned to anger. "What are you talking about? That money was in our joint account. It's mine as much as hers." "That's for the court to decide," Barbara replied calmly, handing him the papers. "You're required to appear in court tomorrow morning. Don't even think about trying to leave town." As they walked away, Amanda could hear Brendan cursing and yelling behind them. She felt a mix of satisfaction and fear. The confrontation she had both dreaded and longed for had finally happened, but the real battle was just beginning. The next morning, Amanda found herself in a small county courthouse, her heart pounding as the judge entered the room. Brendan sat on the opposite side, looking disheveled and angry. Barbara presented their case with precision, laying out the timeline of events and presenting evidence of Brendan's sudden spending spree. She argued that the lottery winnings were solely Amanda's, as they were obtained after the divorce proceedings had begun and were not disclosed as an asset during the divorce. Brendan's lawyer attempted to counter, claiming that the money had been deposited while they were still legally married, making it a joint asset. But his arguments seemed weak in the face of the evidence Barbara presented. As the judge retired to consider his decision, Amanda sat rigidly in her seat, her future hanging in the balance. The minutes stretched into hours, each tick of the clock amplifying her anxiety. Finally, the judge returned. The courtroom fell silent as he began to speak. "In the matter of Reeves versus Reyes regarding the disputed lottery winnings, I find in favor of the plaintiff, Amanda Reeves." Amanda's breath caught in her throat as the judge continued. "Mr. Reyes is hereby ordered to return all funds withdrawn from the joint account, minus any legitimate expenses that can be verified. Furthermore, Mr. Reyes will be subject to a full audit to ensure compliance." Relief washed over Amanda like a tidal wave. She had won. Her future, so nearly stolen from her, was back in her hands. As they left the courthouse, Barbara squeezed Amanda's shoulder. "Congratulations. Now the real work begins, recovering every cent he spent." Amanda nodded, a mix of exhaustion and elation coursing through her. The road ahead would be long, but for the first time in months, she felt hope blooming in her chest. Her new life, delayed but not denied, was finally within reach. The weeks following the court decision were a whirlwind of activity for Amanda. With Barbara's expert guidance, she navigated the complex process of asset recovery. Every purchase Brendan had made with her lottery winnings was scrutinized, from the flashy sports car to the designer clothes hanging in his resort suite closet. As the audit progressed, Amanda found herself oscillating between satisfaction and disbelief at Brendan's extravagant spending. He had blown through a significant portion of the winnings in just a few weeks, living a lifestyle that she had only dreamed about. The irony wasn't lost on her. All those years of pinching pennies while he complained about their finances. And here he was, spending her money like water. One particularly revealing discovery came when the auditors uncovered a series of large cash withdrawals Brendan had made. Barbara immediately pushed for an explanation, suspecting he might have hidden away some of the money. Under intense questioning, Brendan finally broke down and admitted to stashing several $100,000 in a storage unit. Amanda felt a mixture of anger and relief as the cash was recovered. Anger at Brendan's deception, but relief that more of her winnings were being returned. Throughout this process, Amanda struggled with conflicting emotions. There was vindication in seeing Brendan face the consequences of his actions, but also a lingering sadness for the years they had shared and the trust that had been irreparably broken. As the recovery efforts continued, Amanda began the process of rebuilding her life. She quit her job at the Wilsons, feeling a surge of satisfaction as she handed in her notice. Mrs. Wilson, who had heard about Amanda's lottery win through the grapevine, seemed shocked that her quiet, hardworking maid had been harboring such a secret. "I always knew you were special, Amanda," Mrs. Wilson said, a hint of regret in her voice. I hope you'll remember us kindly." Amanda simply nodded, thinking of all the times she had felt invisible in this house. Now, as she walked out the door for the last time, she held her head high, no longer just a shadow in someone else's life. With Barbara's help, Amanda began to make plans for her future. She enrolled in college courses, fulfilling a long-held dream of furthering her education. She also started looking for a new place to live, somewhere far from the memories of her life with Brendan. One sunny afternoon, as Amanda was touring potential apartments, she received a call from Barbara. "Amanda, I have some news," the lawyer said, her voice serious. "Brendan is requesting a meeting with you." Amanda felt her stomach drop. "Why? Haven't we settled everything?" Barbara sighed. "Legally, yes, but he's insisting. Says he wants to apologize face to face. You don't have to do this if you don't want to." Amanda was silent for a long moment, weighing her options. Part of her wanted to refuse, to close this chapter of her life for good. But another part, a part she didn't fully understand, felt a need for closure. "Okay," she finally said, "I'll meet with him. But I want you there with me." The meeting was set for the following day at Barbara's office. As Amanda sat waiting, her hands fidgeting in her lap, she wondered what Brendan could possibly say to make amends for his betrayal. When Brendan walked in, Amanda was struck by how different he looked. Gone was the cocky swagger, replaced by a demeanor of defeat. He sat across from her, his eyes unable to meet hers. "Amanda," he began, his voice hoarse. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't begin to cover it, but I needed to say it. When I saw that money in our account, I lost my mind. I thought it was my chance to finally be somebody, to have the life I always wanted." Amanda listened silently, her face impassive. "I didn't think about you, about what I was taking from you," Brendan continued. "I was selfish and stupid, and I'm paying for it now. I hope someday you can forgive me." As Brendan's words hung in the air, Amanda felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. Not because of his apology, but because she realized she no longer cared about his reasons or his remorse. She had moved beyond the need for his validation or forgiveness. "Thank you for saying that, Brendan," she said calmly. "I hope you find peace with yourself. Goodbye." With that, Amanda stood and walked out of the office, leaving her past behind. As she stepped into the sunlight, she felt truly free for the first time in years. The future stretched out before her, full of possibilities, and she was ready to embrace it. 6 months had passed since Amanda's fateful meeting with Brendan. The legal battles were finally over, and she had reclaimed the majority of her lottery winnings. With her newfound financial security, Amanda embarked on a journey of self-discovery and personal growth. She had moved to a modest but comfortable apartment in a vibrant part of the city, far from her old neighborhood. The space was filled with light and adorned with colorful artwork, a stark contrast to the drab, cramped apartment she had shared with Brendan. Each morning, as she sipped her coffee on the small balcony overlooking a bustling street, Amanda marveled at how different her life had become. Her days were now filled with purpose and learning. She had thrown herself into her college courses with enthusiasm, excelling in her studies, and discovering a passion for social work. The idea of using her experience to help others in difficult situations gave her a sense of meaning she had never known before. Despite her success, Amanda found that adjusting to her new life wasn't always easy. The years of financial struggle and emotional abuse had left their mark. She often caught herself hesitating before making a purchase, the old fear of not having enough money still lingering. To address these issues, she started seeing a therapist, slowly working through the trauma of her past. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Amanda decided to visit Mr. Chen's store. She hadn't been back since the day she discovered her lottery win, and she felt a need to reconnect with the kind man who had been her unwavering support. As she pushed open the door, the familiar chime of the bell brought a smile to her face. Mr. Chen looked up from behind the counter, his eyes widening in surprise and delight. "Amanda!" he exclaimed, hurrying around the counter to greet her. It's so good to see you. How are you doing?" Amanda found herself enveloped in a warm hug. "I'm doing well, Mr. Chen. Really well. I wanted to come and thank you properly for everything you did for me." Mr. Chen waved off her thanks, ushering her to a small table in the corner of the store. As they sat down, Amanda noticed the concern in his eyes. "You look different," he said, studying her face. "Happier, yes, but also tired?" Amanda nodded, touched by his perceptiveness. "It's been a challenging few months. Wonderful in many ways, but also overwhelming. Sometimes I feel like I'm still trying to figure out who I am without the struggle." Mr. Chen nodded sagely. "Change, even good change, takes time to adjust to. You've been through so much, Amanda. Be patient with yourself." As they talked, Amanda found herself opening up about her fears and insecurities. She confessed her worry that she didn't deserve her good fortune, and her fear that somehow it would all be taken away again. Mr. Chen listened attentively, his kind eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, he reached across the table and patted her hand gently. "Amanda," he said, his voice firm but gentle, "you've always deserved a good life. The money didn't make you deserving. You were deserving all along. Now you have the chance to live the life you've always should have had. Don't let fear hold you back." His words struck a chord deep within Amanda. She felt tears welling up in her eyes, but for once they were tears of relief and gratitude. As she left the store, promising to visit more often, Amanda felt a renewed sense of purpose. Mr. Chen's wisdom had reminded her of how far she'd come and the potential that lay ahead. Walking home, Amanda made a decision. It was time to stop merely existing in her new life and start truly living it. She pulled out her phone and, after a moment's hesitation, dialed a number she'd been avoiding. "Hello, Barbara. It's Amanda. Remember that charity organization you mentioned? The one that helps women escape abusive relationships? I think I'm ready to get involved." As she hung up the phone, Amanda felt a surge of excitement. For so long, her life had been defined by what she lacked: money, freedom, self-worth. Now she had the opportunity to define herself by what she could give. The sun was setting as Amanda reached her apartment building, casting a warm glow over the city. As she looked up at the sky, streaked with vibrant oranges and pinks, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. The road ahead might not always be easy, but for the first time in a long time, Amanda was looking forward to the journey. A year had passed since Amanda's decision to volunteer, and her life had transformed in ways she never imagined. Her work with the charity organization, New Beginnings, had become a central part of her life. She found herself dedicating more and more time to helping women escape abusive relationships and rebuild their lives. On a crisp autumn morning, Amanda stood before a group of women at a New Beginnings shelter. Her hands trembled slightly as she began to speak, sharing her own story of struggle and eventual triumph. As she looked into the faces of the women before her, some bruised, all carrying the weight of their experiences, she saw reflections of her former self. "I know it seems impossible now," Amanda said, her voice growing stronger with each word, "but you have the strength within you to reclaim your life. I'm living proof that it's possible." After the session, a young woman named Melissa approached Amanda, tears in her eyes. "Your story, it's given me hope," she whispered. "I didn't think I could ever get out, but now I think maybe I can." Amanda felt a lump in her throat as she hugged Melissa. This, she realized, was why she had gone through everything, to be able to offer hope to others who were still trapped. As Amanda's involvement with New Beginnings grew, so did her confidence. She found herself speaking at fundraisers, meeting with local politicians to advocate for stronger domestic violence laws, and even appearing on local news segments to raise awareness. Her personal life was flourishing too. She had formed close friendships with some of her fellow volunteers, and for the first time in years, she felt part of a supportive community. She even started dating again, cautiously at first, but with growing enthusiasm as she learned to trust her own judgment. One evening, as Amanda was leaving the New Beginnings office, she ran into Barbara, who had become both a friend and mentor over the past year. "Amanda!" Barbara exclaimed, her face lighting up. "I was hoping to catch you. I have some news." They walked to a nearby cafe, where Barbara revealed that New Beginnings was looking to expand its operations. "We want to open a new shelter in the next town over," she explained, "and we want you to run it." Amanda's jaw dropped. "Me? But I don't have any management experience." Barbara shook her head, smiling. "You have something more valuable, lived experience and a genuine passion for helping others. You've come so far, Amanda. You're ready for this." As the implications of Barbara's offer sank in, Amanda felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. Running a shelter would be a huge responsibility, but it would also be an opportunity to make an even bigger difference in women's lives. "Can I think about it?" Amanda asked, her mind already racing with possibilities. "Of course," Barbara replied. "Take all the time you need." Over the next few days, Amanda found herself at a crossroads. Running the shelter would be a full-time commitment, meaning she'd have to put her college studies on hold. It would be challenging, potentially stressful work, but the thought of being able to create a safe haven for women in need filled her with a sense of purpose she couldn't ignore. She thought back to her own journey, the fear, the uncertainty, the moments of despair. She remembered the relief she felt when she first realized she had a way out, and the gratitude she had for those who had helped her along the way. Making her decision, Amanda called Barbara. "I'll do it," she said, her voice firm with resolve. "I want to run the new shelter." Barbara's joy was palpable even over the phone. "I knew you'd say yes. We'll start the preparations right away." As Amanda hung up, she felt a sense of coming full circle, from a trapped, desperate housemaid to the future director of a women's shelter. Her life had taken an extraordinary turn. That night, as she stood on her balcony, looking out at the city lights, Amanda reflected on her journey. The lottery win had given her the means to escape her old life, but it was her own strength and determination that had brought her to this point. She thought of Melissa and all the other women she had met through New Beginnings. She thought of the women she hadn't met yet, the ones who would find refuge in the new shelter. For the first time, Amanda felt truly grateful for everything she had been through. It had all led her here, to a place where she could make a real difference. As she turned to go back inside, Amanda paused for a moment, taking a deep breath of the cool night air. She was ready for this new chapter, ready to help write new beginnings for herself and for others. The future, once so bleak, now shone with promise and purpose. 2 years had passed since Amanda took on the role of director at the New Beginnings shelter. The journey had been challenging, filled with long days and emotional hurdles, but also incredibly rewarding. The shelter had become a beacon of hope in the community, helping dozens of women and children find safety and rebuild their lives. On a warm spring morning, Amanda stood in front of the shelter, watching as a group of volunteers planted a small garden. The building, once a dilapidated old school, now stood proud and welcoming, its walls freshly painted in soothing colors. It was a physical manifestation of the transformation that happened within its walls every day. As she observed the scene, Amanda's phone buzzed with a message from Barbara. "Turn on the local news. Now." Curious and slightly concerned, Amanda hurried inside to the common room, where a small TV was always tuned to the local news channel. What she saw made her gasp. Brendan, her ex-husband, was being led away in handcuffs. The ticker at the bottom of the screen read, "Local man arrested in connection with gambling ring and money laundering scheme." Amanda sank into a nearby chair, her mind reeling. She hadn't thought about Brendan in months, had finally reached a point where the mention of his name didn't stir up old pain. And now, here he was, thrust back into her life in the most unexpected way. As she watched the news report unfold, Amanda learned that Brendan had gotten involved with a dangerous crowd after blowing through the money he'd stolen from her. Desperate to maintain the lavish lifestyle he'd briefly enjoyed, he'd turned to illegal activities. A mix of emotions washed over Amanda: shock, sadness, and a strange sense of closure. She realized that while she had been building a new life dedicated to helping others, Brendan had continued down a path of selfishness and greed. Later that day, as Amanda was finishing up some paperwork in her office, there was a knock at the door. She looked up to see Melissa, the young woman she had met on her first day of volunteering, now a fellow staff member at the shelter. "I saw the news," Melissa said softly. "Are you okay?" Amanda nodded, offering a small smile. "I am, actually. It's strange, but I feel free, like the last tie to my old life has finally been severed." Melissa sat down across from her eyes filled with understanding. "You've come so far, Amanda. We all have, thanks to you." The two women talked for a while, reflecting on their journeys and the impact the shelter had made. As they spoke, Amanda felt a renewed sense of purpose wash over her. "You know," she said, "seeing Brendan on the news made me realize something. We need to do more to prevent these situations from happening in the first place." Melissa leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Amanda's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "Education. We need to reach young people before they fall into patterns of abuse or become abusers themselves. What if we started a program in local schools?" Over the next few hours, Amanda and Melissa brainstormed ideas for a new initiative. They envisioned workshops teaching healthy relationship skills, recognizing signs of abuse, and promoting self-worth and independence. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the office window, Amanda felt a sense of excitement she hadn't experienced in a long time. This new project could be the key to breaking the cycle of abuse for future generations. That evening, as Amanda locked up the shelter, she paused to look at the building that had become so much more than just a safe haven. It was a place of healing, of new beginnings, and now it would become a launching pad for change on a broader scale. She thought back to the day she had bought that lottery ticket, how desperate and trapped she had felt. Never in her wildest dreams could she have imagined where that simple act would lead her. As she walked to her car, Amanda's phone buzzed with a message from Barbara. "Heard about Brendan. Call me if you need to talk." Amanda smiled, appreciating Barbara's concern, but realizing she didn't need to talk about Brendan anymore. Her past no longer defined her. Instead, she typed out a reply. "I'm okay. Actually, I have an idea for a new program I want to discuss with you. Can we meet tomorrow?" Driving home, Amanda felt a sense of peace settle over her. The road ahead was full of possibilities, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly equipped to face whatever challenges might come. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving and helping others do the same. As the city lights twinkled around her, Amanda made a silent promise to herself and to all the women she had yet to meet. She would continue to use her second chance at life to create second chances for others. The best was yet to come. 5 years had passed since Amanda's lottery win, and her life had transformed beyond recognition. The New Beginnings shelter she directed had become a model for others across the state, and their school outreach program was showing promising results in reducing rates of domestic violence among young people. On a crisp autumn morning, Amanda stood at a podium, addressing a crowd gathered for the grand opening of a second New Beginnings shelter. As she spoke about the journey that had brought her to this moment, she caught sight of familiar faces in the audience. Barbara, beaming with pride, Chen, his eyes twinkling with joy, and Melissa, now the director of the original shelter. "5 years ago, I thought winning the lottery was the luckiest day of my life," Amanda said, her voice strong and clear. "But I've come to realize that true fortune isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the lives we touch, the hope we inspire, and the change we create." As applause filled the air, Amanda felt a sense of completion. The money that had once seemed like her only escape had become a tool for widespread positive change. She had not only rebuilt her own life, but had helped countless others do the same. After the ceremony, Amanda found a quiet moment with Barbara. "I can't believe how far we've come," she said. her eyes misting with emotion. Barbara squeezed her hand. "You did this, Amanda. Your strength and vision made it all possible." As they chatted, Amanda's phone buzzed with a news alert. She glanced at it and felt a final piece of her past fall into place. Brendan had been sentenced to prison for his crimes. But instead of feeling vindicated, Amanda felt only a calm acceptance. His choices were his own, just as hers had been. That evening, Amanda returned to her apartment, the same one she'd moved into after leaving Brendan. Though she could afford a more luxurious place now, she'd chosen to stay, using her wealth to fund the shelters and support programs instead. As she settled on her balcony with a cup of tea, Amanda reflected on the journey of the past 5 years. From a trapped, desperate housemaid to the director of 2 shelters and a respected advocate for domestic violence survivors, it had been a transformation she never could have imagined. She thought of all the women and children who had found safety and new beginnings through their shelters. She thought of the young people in schools who were learning to recognize and avoid abusive relationships. And she thought of herself, how she had grown, healed, and discovered a strength she never knew she possessed. The lottery win had given her the means to escape, but it was her own resilience and compassion that had truly changed her life. Money could buy freedom, but it couldn't buy purpose. That Amanda had found on her own. As the sun set over the city, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Amanda felt a deep sense of peace. The future stretched out before her, full of possibilities and opportunities to make a difference. She had taken her second chance at life and used it to create second chances for others. Amanda smiled, raising her cup in a silent toast to the journey behind her and the road ahead. Her story wasn't just about winning the lottery. It was about winning back her life and helping others do the same. And that, she knew, was the greatest prize of all. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. Now, how about another one? To watch another nice story, just click on the video appearing on your screen.